September would be good. We haven't had a celebration for becoming disaffiliated, have we? That's something that's definitely in order. So matter of fact, we were thinking like right after the annual, whoa, that's bright. Right in my eyes too. Now you can see me. We were thinking right after annual conference, and we'd just been going at it for months and months. Got done with annual conference, got my documents, came back with a quitclaim deed and the bill of sale for the property. I guess they had to do that for some legal reason, right? But, and then I realized I was kind of tired. It's like, to properly celebrate, I need to get caught up a little bit here, Probably all of us did. So we think we'll plan some kind of celebration in September. Does that sound okay? Sounds good. So here's what I wanted to do. I thought that when we first started the conversations about what was going on in the United Methodist Church, and that leading up to why it was a good idea to get out, and kind of worked out. We got out just in the nick of time. They're closing that window really fast. Those churches who didn't get in before the annual conference vote on that are having a hard time making the timeline. The bishop in Missouri, Bob Farr, had originally said, we won't do any special sessions to approve any churches to disaffiliate after our scheduled annual conference. Well, the dilemma of that is, that paragraph 2553 that allows the disaffiliation terminates, and it dies December 31st, 2023. And it seems a little unfair to say we're just going to give one date in the middle of the year in June, and you basically had to have all your paperwork ready by, 1st of May to be able to make that. And so that left a lot of churches just hanging with the whole rest of the year, And so they finally decided they were going to do a special session in November, but then they weren't going to do any of the required town hall meetings or anything through August and September. And so where does that leave the churches who didn't get in to get voted on in June? Well, there's a very narrow window for them to get it all taken care of, and you don't think that isn't by design, right? And so we were fortunate to get in when we did and get the vote and get it approved and so forth. Churches all over are just now learning what's going on and saying, we've got to get out of this mess while we can. And many of them are discovering it's too late. They're stuck. They are literally trapped in a denomination that has abandoned the gospel and abandoned the faith. And expected to keep sending them money.
Will they ever get a chance to do that? Ever?
We don't know. That's entirely up to the bureaucracy of the United Methodist organization, of which we are no longer a part of, fortunately. I'm saying some of this just for it to resonate how big a decision that we made and how timely that was. I have had pastors contacting me at least one a week, sometimes one a day or more, basically saying, what can you tell me in terms of how we can get out? How can you help us figure this out and get our church out of this? And there's still other churches who figured out they need to get out, and then they find out how much it's going to cost and realize they don't have any money. They're barely making expenses as it is, paying their utilities, paying a pastor, and just staying open. And even if there's a couple of organizations right now that are making low interest loans to help the churches who don't have the funds on hand to get out. But so many of them, even if they borrowed the money, don't have the income to service the debt. And there are in some conferences, there have been congregations who came to that dilemma and literally just handed their keys to the building to the district superintendent and walked away and said, we cannot stay. And that's true of just about any of those who figured out what's going on. But quite honestly, the desire of any church to get out is directly proportionate to the amount of information they have. So how do they prevent the disaffiliations? Well, they suppress the flow of information. That's how, until it's too late. Okay, so that's enough of that. But you get the picture on this. Basically, a denomination that has said, we no longer really believe that people really need Jesus Christ. What they need is social action. What they need is the laws of the land changed, better living conditions, more rights of minorities and the marginalized enforced. And they've decided that's what the gospel is, rather than getting people into a relationship with Jesus Christ and receiving eternal life. And people have awakened to that and said, we may not be the best Christians in the world or the best theologians or anything else, but we've got to be true to the basics of the gospel. We draw the line somewhere. Rich, you got a question?
Well, how is this affecting the missionaries?
Well, the United Methodist Church, and I guess you're referring specifically to within the United Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church basically has a couple of different types of missionaries. Some are in their country leading projects such as, I was director of the Safe Water projects for the Mozambique Initiative for 11 years? And a lot of missionary work is doing some things like that, okay? And those will continue. However, some of those, and even the United Methodist churches in some of these other countries, are trying to distance themselves from that. They'll have to find other avenues of support for a whole lot of that. And the other type of missionaries you've got in the United Methodist Church are, I would group a whole lot of those. You got your, medical and human needs and a lot of those kind of things. And others are advocacy type of missions. What we don't see a whole lot of in the United Methodist Church in terms of missionaries in foreign soil is church planters. You don't see that a whole lot. And it's yet to be seen how that's going to affect the total, because right now the percentage of churches that have pulled out or have completely disaffiliated, they've made their vote and they've got it ratified or approved at their annual conference, is under 25%. It's about 23% of the total. But here's the part that it really is an eye-opener. That represents about 74% of the denominational budget. Yes. And if they want to talk it down and say with just a small percentage of churches, in many cases it is the larger churches, the churches that are contributing the most in terms of apportionment dollars, and they are going to be dealing with that. But again, we're out, thankfully, and as I'd said before, I don't want us to get through this conversation. We had to do a lot of, expose kind of conversations so we would realize all that was going on. But once we get out, I don't want us to just keep a conversation going about everything that's wrong with United Methodism. However, there are still churches trying to get out, and I'm glad to expose things and help them to understand, in such a way that they can make an informed decision. Because I think that's something every pastor and every church should have access to, is the ability to make an informed decision and knowing what's going on without the facts being hidden and twisted and misrepresented. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to get that unless you're really doing some research right now. So, overall picture is that, and here we are. Now we have accomplished that, breathing a sigh, kind of catching our wind. But now what do we do? We're not a United Methodist congregation. We don't have a district. We don't have a conference. We don't have anybody to turn to and tell us what to do. Now, for me, that's great. For a lot of people, that's great because it was getting to where it felt like to me, all we were doing was reports and forms and meetings. Another report, complete another form, do another interview, another evaluation, and nothing really coming out of it. Plus sending in apportionment dollars and not seeing anything that ever helped our church to grow or improve. Just throw the money out and hope that the denomination's doing good things with it, you know. And so for me, having the independence there is a positive thing. But I'm not naive enough to think that that's how it feels for everybody. There's a lot of people right here in this church and sitting in this room today whose church experience has always been in terms of an institution or organization. And we all do what comes down from the bureaucracy and the leadership telling us, well, we don't know what to do until they tell us, right? And fair enough, okay? So I'm on one end of the spectrum with that. It's like, okay, we're independent. We get to forge our own highway, our own path out here. We can do some pioneering ministry in a time when that's really needed in the world. And on the other hand, there are people saying, well, what do we do now that we don't have an organization that has, all the rules in place and is telling us what's important to do next and all those kind of things. And so we've got both ends of that spectrum and everything in between as part of our congregation. So as our conversation about our future unfolds, we've got to take into consideration all of those viewpoints, the emotions that turns up for all of us. Because a lot of people, you say we're independent, we're not aligned. Some people are ready to whoop and shout and celebrate, and others have a high level of anxiety and insecurity because of that. And all of that's legitimate. The whole spectrum of that is, perfectly legitimate. It's based, a lot of it, on how each of us are wired, but even more importantly, what our background has been in our experience with church. And so we've all that to consider. And as we get into that conversation, it's going to take several sessions here for us to, really forge things out, because I'm going to share some ideas, and for some of you, this may not move along quite as quickly as what you would like, but be patient with us, okay? We are going to get there. We're going to deal with everybody's questions. If we can't answer them in this session right now, which is not very likely, we will answer those in future sessions, okay? We're going to, when I was doing the Ask Tony or informational sessions leading up to our vote on disaffiliation, I was doing like every second week on a Thursday afternoon. Then I discovered there was people who couldn't make those, and I think I added in an evening session and a Sunday afternoon session, some things like that. We'll do all of that this time too. But what I want to talk about is, now that we are not part of the previous organization, now that we're independent, all of our identity in the past has been, we are a United Methodist Church. What are our values? Well, you just look to the United Methodist Church. They tell us. What do we believe? Well, the United Methodist denomination tells us that. What's important to us? Well, you look at the social principles of the United Methodist Church and they tell us that. Okay, so that's not the case now. Some of those things might still be true, but I'm going to guess that if you were left to forge those things out and develop those without reference to that, it might look a little differently. And so that's where we are right now. I am convinced. Let me back up a little bit. In addition to that, here's what else we're dealing with. And this is a sobering reality, okay? You've heard me say this before, but in this context, it's going to mean a whole lot more. Over 40% of our congregation are between 80 and 90 years old. 40%. Okay, now let's add a little bit more on that. An additional 30% are between 70 and 80 years old. All right? Now, that tells us we are sitting on a wealth of knowledge and experience and maturity. Am I right?
Yeah, I like that description. Knowledge and
I'm not wrong. Okay. However, However, and I brought this up a little bit Sunday morning in the message there, we talk about we're going to go do mission trips. We're going to build wheelchair ramps. We're going to put a roof on somebody's house that got torn off in the storms. And then we say, oh, I don't climb ladders anymore. I don't lift an air compressor out of the back of a pickup anymore. And it's just a simple reality that we come to grips with. The things that we used to do aren't the things we can do now. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything either, though, right? And so we have to reshape how we look at a lot of that. But hang on, here's the other side of that. Given those facts, if we were not to very enthusiastically be reaching and bringing in new people over the next 10 years, what would this church look like in 10 years? If y'all didn't hear him, Rich just said a graveyard. I don't know that I'm totally in on that, but we would have fewer people than we have right now just by simple attrition. The 30 and 40-year-olds, they think about the end of life as way, way off, and, don't have to worry about any of that now. And most of us have been to our friends' funerals. Long ago did our parents' funerals. We've seen our siblings, and we've buried them. And our mortality is something we're very conscious of every single day. Yes, ma'am.
Pastor, this is the group that decided to disaffiliate.
Yes, ma'am. She just said, remember, this is the group, in other words, the demographic I just named is the group who decided to disaffiliate, which means a couple of things. They expect to do more to reach people, I would say, because they saw the decline in the United Methodist organization was not going to be helpful, but also they're willing to take some risks and make a bold decision, which says a whole lot, I mean, a lot of people as getting to advancing years are like, okay, let's be, much more reserved and not take any risks or anything. Not you guys. But here's what I'm getting at. We can't just drift along and do church on Sundays and have a good time and maybe support some projects around the area and that sort of thing. We have got to figure out how we are reaching the next generation that will be this church. I don't care what age they are. We get new 70-year-olds, I'm thrilled. I truly am. New people we got coming in are right around 70-ish or so. But we get new 50 and 60-year-olds. We got some youth, man. Okay, but so here's what I want to talk about. The word I want to use is rebranding. Rebranding. And that is what has been our brand since 1969? UMC. See, this church was a Methodist church. Then when they had the merger of the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren, this church became a United Methodist Church, and now it's a Methodist church again in a more independent sense. Okay? So how do we rebrand ourselves to show our identity and to understand who we are, therefore who we can reach and how and all of that kind of thing, right? So here you see can y'all read that slide there? Yeah. Sorry, the backgrounds are terrible in some of that. Plus, I just learned our projector lamps are a few years old and could probably use some updating. Stuff happens, Here's a little bit of what I'd like to talk about. Why should we be thinking about rebranding? How long will we spend on that? And how much money will we spend on that? Then the next thing after that I want to talk about in our first session here is just to start looking at, or just throw out there, what are some of our possibilities for future alignment? And so we'll get into that. So when I say rebranding, what comes to your mind? Okay, a new name, and we kind of have a new name. We were, watch this, we were Kimberling City United Methodist Church, and now we're Kimberling City Methodist Church. So we removed the word united, and we have registered that with the state and the federal government, and our new 501c3 is almost all complete and everything. We've got new bank accounts, and because our bank account wouldn't just change the name. We had to, completely do the whole thing. So there's a lot involved with this. So, yeah, all of that stuff, employer ID number, all those kind of things. So essentially this year I have two employers when it comes tax time. I have Kimberling City United Methodist Church and Kimberling City Methodist Church. It's true. So rebranding means there's a new name. What else does it mean? What's that? Marketing. Okay, marketing. Somebody said a new mission. Carolyn? Yes. What else? What's that? Okay, what's our path forward? Where do we go? Yeah, okay. What else? The biggest thing is, how do we figure all that out? Because once again, there's no organization to tell us. But you guys knew that when you voted to disaffiliate, right? Okay. And what's it? I have some ideas. But so much of it depends on whether you guys embrace those ideas. I can't just take off and say, everybody come on, and they're like, where are we going? Right? But yes, I do have some ideas. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about this rebranding and the why of that. I believe it's essential for us, if we're really going to be more enthusiastic and more aggressive about how we're reaching out and bringing new people in, we've got to understand who we are and what we truly have to offer. And the downfall of almost every church on that is when we start to say who we are, we're talking about who we want to be. And we don't really have an honest presentation of who we are. And that's why it's almost impossible to do this internally. You've got to bring in some outside eyes to look at and evaluate and help decide, here is who you are as a congregation. How would you do that? You would observe, you would talk to people, you look at what the church does, and a lot of things like that. And we're going to get into a little bit of that, and some of that comes from me and us giving them information and them trusting that it's accurate, or being able to confirm that it's mostly accurate, right, or accurate enough to move forward with. So that's some of our why. The rebranding, as I'm looking at it right now, working with a local firm who specializes in this, seemed to be pretty good. And the proposal they have for us right now is to work with us over a span of 19 months, from September of this year up through March of 2025. And then, of course, have an ongoing plan from there, not to just drop it there. Now, I've seen so many businesses or churches get a rebranding package from a marketing firm that basically amounts to, we're going to put together a new look, a logo, a name, and some ideas and things for you. You pay us, and we're handing that over to you, and we're going to wish you good luck. And that's not what we're going to do. We're going to bring somebody alongside us who are going to walk with us week by week, month by month for 19 months. Steve Willoughby is the individual, Willoughby Marketing LLC.
Is he a Christian?
Absolutely. And we are also bringing on board, alongside that is incorporated into this plan as well, some individuals, one individual in particular, but the organization that's behind that, who recently put together a plan for personal evangelism to be used in churches. And that'll be incorporated into this too. Do you know what that organization is? Rich knows. It's called the Gideons. They're going to help too. But you'll see how this unfolds. But so, and this is kind of up front, some things I want to share of how we're carving out our path forward with this. And then, of course, the question, how much is that going to cost us? Well, I kind of like to compare this to what we've been spending on apportionments. We've been spending about $51,000, from $50,000 to $52,000 a year on our apportionments that we paid to the United Methodist Organization. We're no longer paying that. And that is 12 months. Over 12 months, we would pay in around $52,000, $51,000. And what do we get in exchange for that? Well, we won't say nothing, because let's just say if your pastor got hit by a beer truck and couldn't come back, they would appoint a new pastor, right? And try to match that up. And, you know, there's some things like that. And obviously, if you had a pastor or someone that was dipping their hand in the money or something like that, and you're suspicious, they would investigate that and probably remove the pastor. You know, there's some oversight there, and that's helpful, right? But maybe not to the tune of over $50,000 a year, okay? But there are advantages. There are some things there, you know. I wouldn't say that we had a whole lot available to us that was useful in terms of denominational resources or anything that would have been helpful in the local church. But occasionally something would come along we could use. Okay. So for that 19 months, we will spend about what we've been spending for 1 year of apportionments. And it will be paid out over a span of 19 months. That is, if our church council will approve this next Monday evening when I meet with them. And I've already given them a heads up, and nobody cried, nobody showed a lot of heartburn, nobody needed to take a nitroglycerin pill or anything. So I'm thinking that it'll be something we'll approve and go forward with. So anyway, that's a little bit of what I've got in mind there, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit about our future alignment possibilities. But let me break into some of our work towards our rebranding here a little bit, okay? Can I go to the next slide, Mr. Potter, please? Okay, I'll read this to you in case that's too small a print, okay? Can y'all read that? Okay. I don't know why I had that North Star Church on there. I had originally put that presentation together, but I've changed it for us. The first thing I want to talk about is what are our core values as a congregation. So what are core values? Well, our guiding principles. If circumstances were to change so that we're somehow penalized for those principles, we would still keep them. We wouldn't give them up if it made life a little more difficult for us, right? That's what makes them core values. Okay, so in brainstorming with staff and some others, I've listed a couple of things here, but I haven't got your input on these things yet. And the first thing I believe that we have as a core value here is we always want to be a church that's welcoming to everyone. Doesn't matter, you know, what anybody's background or age or where they're from or lifestyle or career or anything else. Anybody should be welcome here, right? So we're welcoming to all. And get this, this is one I have a little trouble putting all the words together on. We could write a book on this one almost. But we value a diversity of worship styles, while still valuing each style and approach individually. Not everyone wants to worship exactly the same. We have a traditional worship service at 9:15 on Sundays. There are a great number of people, or a good percentage of people, who really feel that I don't experience worship unless it is a traditional service. And that could be a pretty broad spectrum of things. For some people, it's all the responsive readings, the liturgies, and a lot of that sort of thing. But I think for us, it means we're going to sing hymns. We're going to have communion on some kind of a structured schedule. And as long as it's possible, we'll have a choir. Some traditional things like that. And of course, we've got that front porch gospel service, and it's kind of nostalgic. It takes people back to their roots. It's old time, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily traditional at all, but it connects people back to their roots and their past in a way. And that's a different style of worship altogether, isn't it? It kind of focuses around the old country and bluegrass gospel songs that were so much a part of the shaping of the United States and other areas, but the shaping of the church of our past. And a lot of people really connect with that. And we also, to a point, value that everybody isn't tied to or connected to a worship that connects us to the past, but a more present day, and music and things like that they're currently developing, and more of a contemporary style of worship. And we don't try to blend all of those together and shake it all up and make it one mixed bag. We value them individually. Am I saying that pretty close to what you would say is a value of this church? So we value a diversity of worship styles. And then I would say we highly value caring for one another, whether it's just within the church or in our community as well. And I think those are three core values that we would like to keep no matter what else changes. Do y'all feel like I'm pretty close on those three? Now the question is, what else would you say is a core value here? Yes, sir, Byron. Mission projects. I'm with you on that. Mission projects. And again, as we were discussing, I brought this up Sunday. We talked, about having the one big thing a year to participate in. And if we can't go on mission teams, mission trips, just physically anymore, what do we do? How do we get that instead? What will we do? What are your thoughts on it, guys? Church goes into the community. Different things that are more appropriate for our physical abilities, right? Okay. Good. Thank you, Byron. Thank you, Marcia. What else would you say is a core value here? Greg. Okay. And I would say that would be, a given, but why not state it, right? That we are centered on faith in Jesus Christ. Am I saying that right? I would think so, because we would have a statement of faith that would state the Bible doctrines that are dear to us and that, that we are going to adhere to. And at this point, we will flesh all that out. And we made a basic statement of faith, but it is pretty much straightforward historical Wesleyan theology. We'll probably flesh that out a little bit more too and get it out. And I kind of like the idea we put something like that out and just let everybody poke holes in it and criticize it a little bit, or a lot, whatever happens. You got to you got to put your insecurities aside to take things like that and put them out and let everybody look it over and offer feedback, which means you're going to get some critique and you're going to get some things that people don't like, and you adjust, right? And so for our statement of faith, we'll be working on that. Same thing with our core values. And so hopefully that helps see the difference between the values and the statement of faith. Right, and same thing with what Greg said. We want to value this. We might say we have a high value on traditional Christian theology, but we do emphasize that in our statement of faith as well. So there's two different ways of looking at this. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, what else would be a core value that you, just from observation of what this church does and how we do it, that you would say, this appears to be something this church values? Okay, we value serving others. Is that how you say it? Okay, all right.
Outreach to the community.
Okay, serving and outreach to the community. I'm making notes, friends. Say that again, please. Living our faith. Okay.
I would like to see us do I would like to see us do something that involves children. I know we're old and I know we can't be a big brother to, that we could be a grandparent, but we complain about the youth, but what are we going to do about it? We sit back and just complain. And we need to find ways to reach young people.
And I believe that in our, working out our vision and our objectives for the future, that's going to be in our goals, right? And I think we value all people and all ages and everything, but as we're looking at what we want to accomplish and do, we're going to put that in the area of our goals and our vision, okay? Make sense? It needs to be there. I'm totally with you on that.
Don't forget it.
It's going to be there. Yeah. Paul. Okay. Okay, so I'll take all of these and try to get the wording together that makes it understood as a value and that sort of thing, and see if you guys will like the way I make that happen. Mark?
I think I agree with the idea that there's a distinction between values and doctrines, but I think one of the most important challenges we're going to have as a church is to see how those intersect. Because
Yep.
we're going to get a lot of outside press. One of the things I imagine is someone coming in talking to you or us and saying, oh, you're the Methodist church that disaffiliates, you're the ones that don't like gays, so is that what you guys are about? Those of us who are aware of why we disaffiliated know that the reasons are way beyond that, but that's in the
Absolutely.
of how we are perceived. And I think we're going to have to find ways, in many ways I think, and that's what I think the United Methodist Church did for so long, is the way to get along with the culture is to do safe ministries or to at least confront those.
Yeah.
Do ministries that will be absolutely unobjectionable, and maybe in line is what you were mentioning in your sermon last week, the Rotary Club.
Yeah. Could be anything, yeah.
We feed people, my wife and I are on a committee to take care of our kids who need backpacks. We do all these things, but we want to make sure that what we flood ourselves with are things that are utterly inoffensive to the culture, and we know they will
Yes, sir.
And as most of us older people now know, eternity is real, and that's what we are. But we have to come up with a way, I think, to not let happen to us what I think in many ways has happened to the United Methodist Church. Yes, 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 we believe in Christ and all of this, and we have the gospel message and healing and stuff. But get that aside. Let's stick to the ministries that will make everybody in the culture like us.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah, I agree. And incidentally, on some of the front end of what you were saying there, I really hope we get opportunities to publicly explain or respond to the questions about us being anti-gay or anything like that. Because right now, the voice in most of the press has been the criticism of the United Methodist Organization, basically saying, oh, they're just a breakaway bunch because they're homophobic. And that has been what we've seen a lot of press about. We all know that is not true. So, yeah, I'm hoping we get opportunities. But again, as you say, for our faith and our values to intersect in a way that's visible and that helps define who we are. And, yeah, if we don't, hash some of this out and state our values up front and be true to those, we won't ever have that opportunity. So, yes, thank you. Anything else you want to state that you believe is a core value? Gail?
What about collaboration with other churches on events, on some of their work, so we can be part of this?
Well, I'm thinking that'll be part of a further conversation rather than part of our core values, but let's go ahead and make a note on that and try to incorporate that. And again, we want to keep a pretty straightforward and yet concise definition of what the core values, how they're defined. Otherwise, anything we do or want to do would become a core value. And that's why I say we want to do children's ministry. Yeah, but that's not one of our core values. We will do those things because of what our core values are, though. Does that make sense? In other words, the core values are not a grocery list of all the things we hope we will do someday or want to do. It's simply observing this church and what we're doing and how we're doing it. What would you say our values are? Core values are not dreams. Core values aren't future hopes or any of that thing. It's simply observing us and saying, by watching this church, I would say here are the 3 or 4 things they value most. Right? Okay. So I am going to move to the next thing that I wanted to discuss, and that is an understanding of what our core purpose is. And I've got an initial note on that, and we have not refined any of this at all yet. But the core purpose is really our basic reason for being. Why do we exist? Some people would say that's our mission statement, okay? Purpose, mission, but that's different from what the vision would be, right? The vision would be all the things we do because of what our mission is, or the things we do in order to accomplish our mission and our purpose, okay? So if we want to state our purpose, it will need to be broad, it will need to be able to endure, and it should serve to guide and inspire us for years, and to be able to choose what ministries we do or don't do as to whether or not they support our purpose and our mission, right? And what I've seen a lot of churches doing over the year, they have groups within the church, just, I want to do this, I want to do that, and we're spending resources, time, and energy on tons of things that don't do anything to support our purpose as a church or our mission as a church. And at some point, we want to make sure that all that we're doing within the church is aligned to what our purpose is. And that all of us are on the same page with that, and we're working toward that. I don't see how in the world a church can expect to grow and reach people and stay together if we don't have a unifying purpose that all the ministries are focused around. And so that's kind of where this comes from. It's, in my definition here, it's more like a shooting star that we chase forever, to always strive for. Disney, their statement, their purpose is make people happy. Well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Well, they don't always, and I would say historically they have been pretty true to their striving toward that. They may have done some things in recent years that have derailed that a little bit, but I'd say overall, historically, they have built everything around, we want to be the place or the organization that people think happy when they think of. People come here because they want to be happy, and while they're here, we're going to do everything we can to make them happy, right? Okay, so first draft of a core purpose for this church. By the way, prior to our disaffiliation, what would you say we had as a core purpose? Did we figure that out among us in this church at any time ever? No, and why not? There was an organization and a bureaucracy that handed it to you and said, this is what your purpose is. Does anybody remember what that was? Make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That was the United Methodist stated purpose, and yet very little of their resources went toward actually doing that. It was just on paper. And that's what they're facing now, because in much of the arguments against disaffiliation, they're pointing to their book of discipline and saying, look, we haven't changed anything in the book of discipline. I don't know why people are leaving. And we would point to the same book of discipline and saying, because you're ignoring it. Same thing with their purpose and everything else. So first stab at a statement of purpose. To build a community of faith where both religious and non-religious people can become deeply committed followers of Jesus Christ. Just for a start. We'll work that out. But I think whatever we state there, it has got to focus around people becoming followers of Jesus. And growing in that, becoming deeply committed followers of Jesus, not just going to church. It's got to be about people following Christ and us creating the environment where that happens, right? What do y'all think on that? Any more thoughts on purpose? Okay, I'm going to assume that's a no. Okay, and our next slide. So, when we have things put together, we will have our goals laid out, our short-term and long-term goals. But one thing we need to have on top of all of that is a big goal that is a stretch, a dream, a reach. That, and one thing, notice in my notes, it says it could be externally questionable. Like people on the outside would say, what, really? You think you can do that? But internally, we wouldn't necessarily regard it as impossible, just difficult. Something to work toward that we know is going to be a gigantic challenge. What is that? We don't know yet. Okay? But we need one. We need a dream. We need to start a chase that is in keeping with our mission, our vision, and goes beyond all of our other goals. What is it? Well, we're going to figure that out, aren't we? How are we going to figure that out? We're going to talk about it. People are going to think about it and pray about it, and there'll be more conversations and questions, suggestions and criticism, and we distill out of that and say, here's what we think would be that big, hairy, audacious goal that will stretch us all and that will get us all to focus and understand that if we really work together and if we put our resources behind this and if God is with us, it can happen. We need that. We can't just do church week after week and hope good things happen. Right? Once again, let me kind of reel back to where I kind of started with this, and that is, we could just say, well, we kind of were doing all right, except for the organization being a problem. Let's just keep doing what we were doing. Let's just kind of go about that and hope it all works out good. We could. How do you guys think that would work for us? It would feel good for a while, and we would just keep noticing fewer and fewer people. And we would have no plan to change that. So I'm saying we've got to get ahead of this now. We might be a few years late, but we can still get ahead of it, right? But we've got to really focus on how do we sustain the congregation and the presence of Christ in this community through this church in 1, 2, 3 generations from now, when none of us are around to observe it. We can't say it's going to be our grandchildren, can we? No. So what's it going to be? You see what I'm getting at? We don't know the answers to those questions yet, but we know nobody else is going to answer them for us. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to do it, and God's going to bless it. I guarantee you that's going to happen. So there's my whole spiel on this. This will be an ongoing conversation for many months. But I also want to talk about some things that are on your mind as well, and that is, well, wait a minute. We talked about disaffiliation and initially being kind of independent, but we also want to discern and determine if there is another Methodist/Wesleyan type denomination that we can align with and feel confident about that. Hasn't that been part of our conversation in the past? All right, so as we look at that, what are some of the possibilities? I would say the first and most obvious possibility and right now, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the churches that are disaffiliating are going pretty quickly to the Global Methodist Church. Global Methodist Church is a new Methodist denomination that was launched for this very reason, for the United Methodists who are leaving to go to and still be traditional Methodist and Orthodox in their theology without just embracing everything and abandoning the gospel, right? So for that reason, a lot of the disaffiliating churches are going to Global Methodist. And that's a big plus. It has a familiar structure, a wording, and a lot of those kind of things, and operates very much the way that everybody knew within the United Methodist Church. But that's also the negative on it as well. The structure is already in place to become a lot like the United Methodist. It already is, right?
Why would we want to jump into another organization?
And Val says, I'll say this so everybody gets it. Why would we want to just jump into another organization? And that's one of the reasons, that kind of questioning right there, why we as a congregation didn't say, okay, we're going to vote this week on disaffiliation, and then we're going to vote next week on joining the Global Methodist Church. Because everybody's saying, I'm not so sure we want to be in another organization that looks just like the one we just left, other than a couple of beliefs. So we have those reservations, but also recognizing on the other end of our spectrum within our group here, there are some who are saying, but it would feel so familiar. We would have some sense of security with that because it resembles what we already know. And so there is that. There's the Global Methodist Church, okay? If you want to study the Global Methodist Church, you can just look it up online. There are several Facebook groups that are focused around the Global Methodist Church. and their beliefs and so forth. You can also go to their website and download and read what is called their transitional book of discipline or doctrines and discipline. And the reason it's transitional is they haven't had their first general conference or convening conference to ratify that, but they have put together basically a book of discipline and doctrines, and as you read it, it will feel and sound very much like the United Methodist Book of Discipline, because that's what it comes out of. But I encourage you to look these things up, go read it, study it, think it through, and be able to contribute that to the conversation, okay? Global Methodist is one of the possibilities. Yes, ma'am.
With that possibility, I guess I'm wondering, why would we want to do that? I'm just throwing it out. Why would we want to do that when we would still be giving money to them, and we would not have it here in order for us to do great things with?
You make a good argument. And if y'all didn't hear her, she was just saying, I understand that's a possibility, but why would we choose to start giving money to another organization like that? It's just that we don't really have control over, and we wouldn't have the funds here to do the things we need to do. Did I say that pretty close? Okay. She makes a solid argument there, but I'm thinking we all need to be informed about these things, and not just say, well, Tony said we ought to do this, and so that's what we're doing. I might at some point express a pretty strong viewpoint on some of this, but I would like to do it in an environment of people who are well informed. And anyway, so what are some of the other alignments that are possible? Yes.
I just want to make something clear. I didn't mean, I don't mean, don't look them up and study them or anything.
I do. I understand. You're just saying, are we sure that that's a good option for us, given our history and given that it would amount to that? Yeah. Absolutely. There have been some of the disaffiliated churches who have joined the Free Methodist Church. Some around in Missouri have done that. What do I know about the Free Methodist Church? Couple things. I do not know a whole lot about the Free Methodist Church. Excuse me. It's a small denomination. It is a denomination that's been in decline for some time, and compared to what our background is, are pretty fundamentalist, or very conservative on a lot of things that I don't know would fit very well with the culture here of this church. But there would, it is there. What else is there? And I'm not giving you an exhaustive list. I'm just saying some of the, the bigger choices out there. Yes, sir, Mark.
Do you think some of the churches, say for example, like in Missouri, we have 72 churches that have disaffiliated. Do you think have you noticed any movement among pastors that are saying they bring the possibility of a regional association of disaffiliated churches that isn't exactly a rigid structure like the global United, but would provide some continuity?
Okay, Mark, a good question. I'm going to repeat the question in an abbreviated form so everybody hears it. He said, there's been some 70 some odd, I believe it's 76 have already disaffiliated in Missouri. And, some of those have gone Global Methodist, several have not. Has there been any movement or discussion towards some kind of alignment or association among those to collaborate in ministry and some like-minded things without it being a denomination? Is that close? Okay, so the very week that we had the vote at our annual conference back in June, several of us pastors of these churches got together at Sunrise Methodist Church at O'Fallon and had a little bit of conversation and prayer time about that sort of thing. There's probably 30 of us. I'm having a sit-down, a meeting on the same day that our next session is scheduled, a lunch meeting with Pastor Schweitzer in Springfield. And the two of us have some more conversation that way. And so basically there is some conversation going on among pastors of churches that have disaffiliated and among some of the lay people as well. But to the end and to the idea that we could have a loose alliance among us where we could cooperate on mission projects and other causes and that sort of thing. Maybe share some different helpful resources with one another and have some events and different things like that without us joining another denomination. At least for the time being, and maybe that will work out and be a good future arrangement. So that is a possibility as well, and I'm involved in some conversations like that. Thank you, Mark. Other denominational alignments is a possibility. Well, the Wesleyan Church is a denomination that some have decided to align with. And there are a few other smaller Methodist denominations. There's actually a group called the Association of Independent Methodists. But as I looked at that, I realized they're mostly in the southeastern United States, and there's no presence at all in Missouri or anywhere around us. And I'm just thinking, yeah, it's probably not us, but it's out there. It's, So there are several possibilities, and we will be looking into all this. But I do encourage all of you to do some reading about the Global Methodist Church and become well informed about that, because I probably get a contact from good people who are involved with the Global Methodist Church at least once a week asking me, how are y'all doing on this? Do you need somebody to come talk to your church about it? And I'm saying, well, we're having some time of conversation and discernment. If time comes when we need, somebody who represents Global Methodists to talk to us, we'll invite you. But I don't think we're at that point right now. Marjorie.
Are all of these organizations such that if you met or joined them, they set a deadline and then on you're always married to them and you can never leave that group and you wind up paying
Stuck.
attention to them like these people are that's being
Okay, so what is the main leverage the United Methodist organization has to keep churches from leaving? Say that it's 2 words. Well, money, but what's the 2 words? Trust clause. What is the trust clause in the United Methodist Church? It is a statement that is attached to the deed of your property, and what does it convey? What does it say? If this facility ever ceases to be a United Methodist place of worship, that the ownership of it goes directly to the annual conference of which it is a part. It basically says the individual church holds the property in trust for the conference they belong to. That, which is why we paid, well, it was going to be $223,000. We ended up, because of Westpath changing some things, we ended up getting for $181,000, I think, is what we ended up paying. We paid $181,000 to be able to leave and keep our property and have them, the quitclaim deed that we received, release us from the claims of the trust clause. Okay? And so
we would be recommitting that to some other organization.
okay, now that we've said that and defined what the trust clause is, what does the Global Methodist Church think and say about the trust clause? Because that's the biggie, isn't it? The Global Methodist Church has declared, we will never have a trust clause.
Okay. Promise?
We promise. Okay, so then how does the congregation leave the Global Methodist Church if you decide you've got buyer's remorse after you're in it, right?
Right.
Well, it's not a simple process. It does require some preliminary work, a certain amount of people being behind the idea, and then a supervised vote of the congregation with a supermajority and some things like that. And so, as Val just said, oh, you mean like disaffiliation? Yes, that's true. Okay, so each of the organization has a little bit of a hook of one kind or another. It's easier to get in than it is to get out. just happens to work that way. Okay, so how much of your time, how much of your valuable time have I used now? I have used just over an hour, about an hour. Okay, so now we'll take just a few minutes. If you guys want to hang out a little bit more, just throw questions at me and I'm going to try to answer them, or else I'll defer till next time. Jim Tyus.
There's nothing been said in this meeting, and I don't disagree on, and I agree with everything, okay? But let me talk about a little reality here. Is that I work with marketing companies in my professional career, and they're good and bad. And part of what bothers me is the 19 months, 18 months. The reality of this church and being on the finance committee is real hard. How many people are born in this church will die in this church? Most of us come from other places. And when it comes time, we have members leave very recently to go back home to families and other areas. That's a hard reality of this congregation, which is different from other churches.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't do anything without considering that, obviously.
And that time span, I keep saying that, you gotta do quicker. You gotta respond quicker than that.
Well, that's not what we're talking about, Jim. Implementation of this doesn't happen overnight. There are several advertising campaigns and marketing strategies along with that. It takes time.
I don't disagree with that. But you talk about how many is 80 to 90 years old, 18, 19 months from now. I mean, that's the thing that really concerns me. Right there is the time factor and getting this thing moving.
Well, we don't get moving within the next month. Just buckle up and hold on. Just buckle your seatbelt, buddy. Hold on to your hat. Yes, sir. I hope that you'll be pleased with movement in the very near future. But we will have them helping us with it for that long as we keep moving forward. Who else? Anna V. But thank you, Jim, and we will keep an eye on that. So, good question, and that's something we've got to work out as well. Because what we have determined for now is that we will keep our required committees as they function for us. For example, we've got Board of Trustees, we've lost some people, we've got to add some more back on that. We have basically a Staff and Personnel Committee, which has been the Pastor Parish Relations Committee, okay, of a Finance Committee, which has obvious purposes, and then we have an overall church council, and in our, a corporate structure that can be called your church council, your board of directors, or whatever. And that's our committee structure, and as long as we can work that out where that's serving us, as we draw out our structure, we'll keep those in place, but we need to study that and see if we need to change that some too. Now, not to say we can't have other like ad hoc committees to work out some things for missions and other things like that as needed, but to keep those required committees in place because there's important business they're dealing with, and if we dropped those, we wouldn't have, a means in place and any accountability for dealing with that. You don't want to get into any situations where all of that's being managed by the pastor and staff. We've got to keep those things in place. But yeah. Yes, sir, Byron.
Okay, so if this is big regressive, I guess, if the United Methodist Church has lost 73% of its funding, it's essentially bankrupt. What is going to happen to that organ? I mean, that's not our concern here today, but it is to a degree, because it's going to be an incredible all that.
Well, I think they're able to defer the impact of that for one big reason. Anybody want to state what that reason is? The ransom fees, the two years of apportionments and unfunded pension liabilities that they collected from all the disaffiliating churches, that's buying them time. So they'll be able to soften the immediate impact of that from, each church leaving has had to pony up with funds there as if they were going to be around 2 or 3 more years. Okay? But the impact is going to happen nonetheless. And I don't know, because I see these the top-heavy bureaucracy. If you look at all the general boards and agencies, General Board of Church and Society, General Commission on the Status and Role of Women, General Commission on Race and Religion, General Board of Global Ministries, General Board of Higher Education and Ministry, and I've just started. And each of those have massive offices and personnel. And guess what? They a few years ago, at General Conference, they passed some legislation that would downsize some of those. You know what happened? Anybody remember? They appealed it to the Judicial Council, and they said, oh, yeah, well, I guess that won't really work. You can't do that. So it didn't happen. So they didn't, even when they passed legislation to downsize the boards and agencies, did not succeed. So they kind of get their way in that organization. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but they're going to stay top heavy. They've made that pretty clear.
Just what you said, it'll be essentially a bankruptcy that you get.
Yeah, they will have to completely.
Forget about the fact that we have a percentage, very
Yep.
steep curve.
Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking they've got a couple of years to completely restructure how they're doing things financially. Then they're out of money. I mean, at that level.
So once they get all these churches back, I mean, the generally, at the church exist, they get to pay the insurance on that.
Well, and Byron, you bring up a good thing. Here's an example. A church near us recently had a vote. It requires a 2/3 majority to disaffiliate. They fell 5 votes short of disaffiliation. Okay, so they didn't get to disaffiliate. But that tells you that over 60% of the people there wanted to disaffiliate. It didn't pass. Do you think they are all going to stay in that church? They're going to vote now with their feet and walk away from that and take their money with them. So that church is going to have 30-40% of the people they had prior to the vote. How are they going to continue to support the denomination in the way they have? And that's happening all over the place, many more than you would think. So just the number actually disaffiliating is a deceptive number when you look at the numbers of churches that attempted to disaffiliate but fell just a little bit short of the required 2/3 majority. That's a lot. And people are just going to leave those churches. They already are. Anna V.
I have a question. Because of controversy of United Methodist and Methodist, should we have a name change?
That needs to be in our conversation as well. And we can do that. And you're not the first person to bring it up. It's come up several times. And I kind of wonder, one of the things that came up when we were talking about disaffiliation was a lot of people felt a strong connection to the word Methodist. And I've heard from several people at that time, man, I've been a Methodist all my life. I've been a Methodist these many years, and now I'm not going to be. Okay? And we said, well, actually, we're just going to be not United Methodist. Okay? And I think we probably still have a strong connection within the church to the word Methodist, but you may be right. I'm going to do an experiment. You guys do science with me? How many of you would prefer a name that does not have the word Methodist in it? Okay, how many of you say, I absolutely need to keep the word Methodist in the name of the church if I'm going to be part of it? Okay, all right. That's like double the number on the other side. How many of you say, I don't really care? Okay, so you kind of see what we're working with, right? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
In about 5 years, would the United Methodist Church give us anything to get back in because they're running out of money?
Oh, you mean like an incentive? Okay, do y'all remember when we had the town hall meeting here? The conference treasurer, Nate Berniking, came and spoke, and someone asked the question, if a church disaffiliates and then decides they want to get back in, do you remember how he answered that? Anybody remember that coming up in that meeting? He said, no, he actually said, we're going to make it easy to get back in.
But they won't pay you to get back.
I don't think there will be any financial incentive for coming back. So I get this thing from DirecTV all the time. We'll give you $600 to switch to our service, right? No, I don't think there's going to be an incentive, anything like that. Guys, all your questions are really good, and hopefully your concerns will be things that we address well and everything. That's why we're doing this. We want to hear you, and figure out things together as we go forward. Chances are we won't be able to do everything that everybody thinks we should do or wants, but hopefully it will be within the realm of, okay, I can live with that. There's some things that you would like to see differently. Hopefully what we end up doing will be something that you can live with. As I said all along, I hated the whole idea of them forcing us into this disaffiliation stuff by their actions and by betraying the pastors and the churches, because that's what forced us into this whole situation. But that my goal was to keep our congregation together through it. We've gained people because of it, but we also lost some people, 4 that I know of. So I hate that. Good people. I didn't want to lose anybody. But what would be even more hurtful is if, as we're moving forward and figuring things out, that people jump ship and just say, yeah, this isn't going the direction I'd hoped. I'm just going to have to find something else. We could lose people that way too. Big question in my mind is, how do we avoid that too, So if y'all help with that, we'll figure it out and we'll try to all stay together. All right, any more big questions before we wrap it up? Okay, let's have a word of prayer and we'll cut loose. God, thank you for working through us, and we know that if we be faithful to the gospel and to Jesus Christ, you're going to bless what we do. We pray that you bring new people in and help us to love them and help them to grow, help them to know you. God, we pray for the future of this church, that we're able to make plans now that ensure that this church is still growing 3-4 generations from now. We don't yet know what those plans are, but we know you're going to guide us in it. In Jesus' name, amen.